Welcome to the Rainy Day Recess podcast. I am Jamie, one of your on-air hosts, along with
Mike,
Amanda,
Bob,
Adrian. We are passionate early learning professionals from the Child Care Resource Team who love talking about the issues and current events that affect our daily work with children and families. In this podcast series, we will discuss everything from the joy of play and even what's up with lava lamps to critical race theory, gender stereotyping, and more. Whoever you are, a parent, teacher, coach, or ordinary mortal who simply stumbled upon this podcast, we are happy you're here. Our podcast series is not for the faint of heart, so consider this your one and only warning. We will get serious, we may make you uncomfortable, and our episodes will always be infused with joy and humor. Please join us and become a part of the Rainy Day Recess community. But before we dive into today's topic of conversation, we want to do a quick shout out for the two other members of our Rainy Day Recess team, Rashad Medley and Christina Jacobson, who provide invaluable behind-the-scenes support of this podcast. Welcome to the Rainy Day Recess podcast. I'm Jamie, one of your on-air hosts, along with Adrian, Amanda, Bob, and Mike. Behind the scenes, we have Rashad and Christina making all the technical magic happen. Please join us and become a part of the Rainy Day Recess community. Our topic today is self-care, resilience, and holding hope. So everybody, what is your number one tip for taking care of yourself?
my number one tip sounds so obvious, and it isn't always easy, and it makes a huge difference. Get enough sleep. It makes daily challenges less overwhelming. It enhances our ability to empathize with others, and it fuels more creative thinking and behavior.
mine is to listen to your body. I spent so many years just kind of living through pain and popping Advils and trying to muscle through the day without complaint. And finally, getting yourself checked out and following doctor's advice in terms of therapies and exercises and things like that that can really support your overall health. The quality of life is through the roof now compared to where it was before.
my main tip is really just self-awareness, to have the self-awareness and be proactive, not wait until you're in crisis mode, but to just really be reflective around what your needs are, what your capacity and bandwidth is, and make sure that you're supporting yourself, because we all have different tips. What works for me might not work for you, but just being sure that you're staying on top of what your needs are and you're clear with other people.
Yeah, Bob, I agree. I think mine is taking a moment to be mindful. Sometimes that's just doing the dishes or listening to everybody be asleep. Being really present is one of my favorite times and ways to take care of myself.
And, they always talk about putting your mask on first before you help someone else. And that is so true. And thinking about taking care of yourself is taking care of others. And so really listening to your spirit, your mind, your body, being in tune with that and making that time. All right, team, let's move on.
Yeah, I mean, we talked about a little bit about self-care, and that's always come up as quite a bit through COVID, and probably before that, but made even worse. What's talking about things made worse? What's our diagnosis of the state of our field right now? We're almost 2.5 years into this pandemic. We've had a lot of experience with resilience and holding hope. What's been working and what's not? And what should we be thinking maybe our short and longer term priorities should be?
I had a long conversation last weekend with the director of an early learning program in the Seattle area. And what struck me in that conversation was how utterly weary both she and her staff are dealing with the unremitting challenges of the pandemic. And now we're what stage are we in? Like stage 87.2 of the pandemic. Making continual adjustments, and even if staff have literally had time off, she says that she's worried she's going to lose them. The field's going to lose them because they are having a harder and harder time getting up each morning and mustering the energy to go through another day. The factors that have always been in the field, like being underpaid and underappreciated, are still there. But the pandemic has magnified the challenges, and she mentioned something that I've heard other folks mention as well, that a lot of kids, because of various factors associated with the pandemic, they're not progressing in their social emotional skills to the same extent that we would have expected before. And that's making the job of teachers or caregivers even harder.
I agree. Same thing I'm hearing from providers, that they're just feeling really overwhelmed, and that there's never enough hours in the day. There's never enough hands to help. Parents are noticing a lack of quality, and really trying to keep up with all of the health and safety standards that are expected. Buying new equipment for their programs to make them, more COVID ready, spending money out of own pockets to try to make things safe for everybody. And, it's a thankless job often as it is. And so then adding on a pandemic and a health crisis, and you just get people that are so weary and so burnt out. And we were running on steam a year ago, and there's just no steam left. And that's where we're really seeing a lot of providers struggling.
One frustration I'm really hearing right now is that there's a lot of talk about things opening up or things going back, but many providers want people to remember, we've been here this whole time. Some of them never close their doors, or maybe only close their door for a week or two, and have been open this whole time. And so yes, they experience that burnout, and as well the expectations that change on top of what they've already been doing all along. And yeah, I think teachers are burnt out, children are burnt out, stress levels are very high, and the supports aren't there. And now mandates and things are saying, well, now it's time to do more. Now there are more expectations we're piling on top of you. And the pandemic has not gone away. The realities of social distancing, how do you keep children safe, and how do you get them in and out the door, continue to be major challenges.
I agree with all this. I mean, the main issue is, why are workers leaving this work? We've never actually had that conversation fully and at a legislative level that really addresses it. I mean, most of us know what was going on, what the issue is. We're relying way too much on a labor of love. The workforce is already drained, and now you add in unclear rules, unrealistic expectations, little to no benefits, and we've just rocked through this crushing pandemic where most of these locations stayed open, but that didn't mean it didn't affect their personal lives. I mean, people didn't go through their own traumas and own losses during this period. Somewhere there is this solution. Like, there has to be some sort of solution to making sure there's quality care that it exists and that is affordable for families that aren't able to have access to it. Long term, that means paying people more, probably. Bringing benefits into the field and actually following through on the professionalizing the mandates that they put into place that had those unintended consequences of squeezing people out.
Money talks.
We have, as an early learning field, have been holding all of our communities together from day one. We never closed. We, as a field and as a profession, we were and still are those essential workers. We stayed open. We cared for children. We cared for families. Sometimes at the behest of our own families and communities. And people are recognizing that, especially at the beginning, people were really recognizing that. And kind of to keep that going is so much more advocacy, not just by those of us who are in the field, but entire communities recognizing that, hey, I couldn't have kept going. The nurses couldn't have kept going, and the doctors, if I didn't have childcare. And so that advocacy is going to be so important moving forward. So lots of great solutions going on and being offered. So think about kind of taking a turn. If you could drop everything for a week, no questions asked, no budget, worries, What would you do?
That's a tough one. If I could just run off somewhere where that's private, or maybe a tiny cabin, I'm mostly looking for isolation. If I have no consequences, I'm gonna go somewhere. I'm gonna spend a lot of money, but I'm gonna to have all the things with me. But then I want to be left with no Wi-Fi and no one to actually contact me while I snack my way into my quiet solitude. That's what I'd like.
I want to do the opposite. I want to go back to southern Germany, where my wife and I have friends and family, and be utterly drained at the end of that week from running around way too much and doing way too many things. But that sounds super therapeutic at the moment. And now that I hear that the euro has dropped so that it's cheap parity with the dollar, I might actually be able to spend even more money and waste even more money than I would have otherwise. It sounds great to me.
I'm 100% with you, Mike. I've got a very lengthy bucket list of locales I need to see in my lifetime and experience different cultures. And it's definitely where I would spend that week. I don't care how tired I am. I don't care how much I need a vacation from my vacation when I return. I will do every last bit of the things, squeeze every last bit of time and run on fumes so that I can experience the most that I can.
I'm the opposite. I'm a little bit of a homebody. I like to travel, but my favorite part of traveling is when you get home. So I would probably stay home with my dog. I would just spoil my dogs. But really, that's it. I would spoil my dogs. How about you, Adrian? What would you do?
God, only a week. I love water, and so you will find me somewhere, or not find me, but somewhere I will be in the South Pacific, somewhere warm, tropical. I'm thinking beaches, lots of sun, lots of good, like fresh fruit. Yeah. So on that theme of water, and now that we're in summer and thinking field trips, what is one of your favorite destinations or activities to do with kids? And I'll go ahead and start. There's a little island off of Everett called Jetty Island where you can take a little ferry across, and it is a fabulous field trip spot for school agers and preschoolers. It's just awesome place to be.
I think the best field trip that I ever did in my many years as a teacher and administrator in early learning, which we repeated numerous times, was taking kids on a bus ride to get to the ferry dock to ride a ferry someplace, it didn't matter where, never get off the darn ferry, come back around, and then ride the bus again to get back to the program. The kids didn't give two hoots where we were headed. They just liked the experience of hanging out in the back of a bus and then in places on a ferry where I was terrified they were going to jump in, but they never did. So it was great. Transportation.
I have two boys. They're 6 and 12 now, and they are total fishes. And so we are always on the hunt for some water activities, whether it be going to the Y, if the weather's yucky, and swimming during free time. We live down in Puyallup, and we have discovered that the Tacoma parks have some amazing water play activities, spray parks. They've got a new wave pool, a lazy river, all kinds of really cool things. And so that's definitely worth checking out if you're in Pierce County.
I also have a ferry story. So I remember taking toddlers on the water taxi, and they're alerting us that we don't have to put vests on them, life jackets on them. And we're saying, well, we want to teach them about safety. So we're putting the jackets on them one by one, but the water taxi ride is only about 10 minutes. So, I mean, by the time we got the jackets on, it was time to get off, and we had to sit there, and the crew had to wait for us to get all the jackets off the toddlers, and we felt guilty. But yeah, no, my favorite is just like the grocery store. Just take, very basic places, take them to the library, take them just to the places in their community. But if anywhere to take children in all of King County, I would say Carkeek Park is my.
I know for me, I've got my little one, and she's just able to start. She's walking and sprinting and dancing. So any way that's accessible for her to fall safely and explore. So we've been enjoying some tidal pool exploration, Owen Beach out in Pierce County. You can't it's definitely changed over by the 5 Mile Drive, but it's such a beautiful location. Banner Forest is fun. We live out near Kitsap, so we go on little hikes or water strolls down by the port. Now that she can see everything and dance for all the people. Sometimes you guys talked about ferry rides. We took ferry out to Seattle, walked the boardwalk. I think I would definitely agree. Anything outside, really getting kids outside. Those are my favorite memories. Doesn't have to be a big field trip. I love the grocery store idea, Bob. That's fun.
We would give them each one piece of fruit to carry around the store, and then they wouldn't be touching everything, but they'd really focus on, okay, that's your piece of fruit. You're going to give it at the checkout stand, and that's your item.
Oh, that is such a good idea.
Well, that makes me think, when my kids were little, we had a Fred Meyer right by our house and we went there a lot, and they always had a free bowl of fruit out. And so my kids loved it. I couldn't get them to eat fruit otherwise, but there was a free bowl of fruit and it made it all the more enticing. So yeah, it was a fun little shopping experience for them.
This really ties back into self-care, because as a parent, and anyone who cares for children, knowing that using that little tip of free fruit to just easing everyone else's joy while going through the grocery store. Other people thank them for that. I thank them for that. Oh, everyone's able to check out without a screaming child. That's brilliant. Self-care is keeping a child quiet sometimes with a piece of fruit.
And I have to say, that sounds to me like a topic for another podcast. I think about all the small ways in which human beings who have children and don't have children can make human beings who are with children feel more comfortable or at ease. Those little things go a long, long ways. And I recall a conversation I had with some folks who moved from Seattle to Pittsburgh. And a big part of why they moved to Pittsburgh was that on a visit to Pittsburgh, people had been so welcoming of their children that when they got back to Seattle, they decided we need to find jobs in Pittsburgh because our kids don't get that same level of welcoming support. Now, did they just have an unusually great vacation? I have no idea. I haven't talked with them since they moved to Pittsburgh. But it makes me think about the impact that little things, little moments of consideration can have for other human beings. I think we sometimes underrate those.
I've already outed myself as a dog lover, but I was talking to a newer parent who said they felt Seattle treats dogs better than children. Like, dogs are more welcome and accessible, and that's a pretty harsh criticism.
I can totally attest to that. We, again, I live in Puyallup, and we have boomed in recent years. Our school district draws a lot of King County residents down. And our realtor, gosh, we just bought a house, and they said that all these people buying up houses down in Puyallup, it's because they're having kids and they're leaving Seattle. And then you're having people that are moving out of Puyallup and going back to Seattle after their kids are grown. And, it's kind of sad, right? Because Seattle has so much to offer for children. My children love going to Seattle and all the museums and, just walking, like you were saying, Jamie. And it's really sad that it's considered kind of a snubby area for kiddos.
That's so interesting, because I was born and raised here in Seattle and have lived here my entire life. And so I don't know any different, but I think I'm surprised to hear that. But I think also being raised here is community, that I have extended community, cultural community here. And so I always have felt within the city, for the most part, welcomed and a part of Seattle. But I also know that I probably have a very a perspective that is sunshiny and glowy, even with the rain.
It's your home, so it makes sense. You're born and raised here, and it's where you belong for sure. And I think that that's telling as well. Home is where the heart is for sure.
But it's those little things that like yesterday, filling my bucket, I went to the dentist and took my daughter to the dentist for the first time, and things you don't think about, or things that I didn't think about. And I work in this field, and I taking children to do little dental things. And I totally forgot that somebody might need to watch her while I get x-rays done. Like, never crossed my mind that I may need assistance. And bless the dentist's heart. I mean, the receptionist went out of her way to get crayons and entertain her, and just so I could at least get part of my exam done. And that little moment made my whole rest of the day so much better, because it could have been a very different reaction. It could have been a, nope, you didn't get it, too bad, so sad, go home. But we made it work. And it's those kind of little accommodations that you touched on, Mike, that those create resilience, that builds that community too. Like, I'll definitely go back there.
And that with, bringing your child to the dentist, that reminds me too, going back to this COVID conversation we were having earlier, how many people had to put their health needs aside during the pandemic because they couldn't bring children with them to the doctor. So if an adult is home with their children all day, they can't get away to do these doctor visits and things. There's nobody to watch the children. And that, I know that was a barrier for me in getting certain treatments during that time, because there just was no option for my children.
I mean, that's exactly what's a part of what we were talking about, exacerbating the workforce. You can't get the mental health help you need. You're not able to take the time off. You're already, maybe your kid got sick with COVID, or you were also having to then teach at the same time and then go to work and balance all of these different aspects. A workforce was already so exhausted. And then not being able to take your kids in anywhere, that's kind of still lingered. That number of people that can come with, it's definitely made it a little limiting.
Can I follow up on something you said earlier, Jamie? We were talking about the workforce, and you were talking about professionalizing. And I think this is probably a topic for a future show, but I think it's important to make the distinction that different people mean different things when they say that. Some people are talking about providing supports and understanding and recognition for the people in the field, and an acknowledgement that they are experts, and other people mean putting more requirements on top of them that you describe drive people out of the field. And so whether it's educational requirements or other accreditations, that type of professionalizing what drives people out of the field. But taking childcare providers seriously as professionals is a different thing. And so I just want to be clear.
I'm so glad you clarified that. I wouldn't want that to linger with like professionalizing in a different tone. Because absolutely, it's that making those unclear expectations and unrealistic expectations. When you have people that have been doing this work for as long as I've been alive, and now you're having to have an education barrier that's saying maybe you're not qualified, that's wild. That makes no sense. And you're going to be hard pressed to find someone in their late 50s that's going to not tell you that's wild and want to be in compliant with that. So, or in any sort of age range, walking through, whether you're entering or you worked yourself into it because you're a parent. Professionalizing means let's treat them like professionals. Let's pay them like professionals, like they're not, like they're actually the people in charge of our most precious commodity, and value that. I want the most professional people in charge of my kid. She's my favorite. So that's how I feel.
I like to use the word legitimizing. I want to, encourage people to legitimize our industry, legitimize it as critical. You can, I think all of us know how much development occurs in that 0 to 5, that birth to 5 range. And so if we are not legitimizing the care and education that we are providing as professionals to these early learners, we are missing an entire component. We hear about kindergarten readiness, and we hear about the education gaps and things like that. And the problem lies in a lack of legitimacy in that early learning, when these providers are not given the accolades and the, as you mentioned earlier, the wages and benefits of a quote unquote regular teacher, but they are doing incredible work. They can make or break a child's existence, essentially. I mean, there's so much foundation that is laid in those years in terms of social and emotional health that this provider could make or break a child's success in certain areas in life. And so it's really important that the general public recognizes the legitimacy of the work that is being done.
I had held out some hope that that a welcome consequence of the pandemic, I was so naive, a welcome consequence of the pandemic would be an increased recognition of the essential nature of early learning and some partial growth in support on the part of both government and private entities of early learning. The field is hemorrhaging workers. We were already stretched thin even before the pandemic. Let's not forget, it's not as though in early 2020, we moved from a situation of massive oversupply of early learning programs and providers, and absolutely first-rate support of the ones who are all out there, to suddenly having a temporary artificial shortage. No, we went from a state where things were already stretched perilously thin. The rubber bands were always on the verge of breaking, and occasionally one of them would snap, to a situation where programs closed down for good. And I know from my reading that it's been even worse in some other states than in Washington State. But nationally, we've hemorrhaged programs and workers. Most of those aren't coming back. And think about it in our area, the extraordinary costs of rent or purchase of property. Who has the money to start an early learning program, even if that's where your heart was calling to you? And how are you going to staff it, given that people are fleeing the profession after being on the front lines in a pretty unrewarding and challenging way for the last 2.5 years? I'm not sure. All of that doesn't seem to have made nearly enough of a difference. It feels as though somebody in the government has sort of half opened one of their eyes and said, oh, there might be something going on here. Maybe we're going to have to do something at some point about it. But I'm not seeing any evidence, at least to this point, that the response is urgent enough, is commensurate with the scale and urgency of what we need.
That says, and everyone is experiencing staff shortages. But they have a sign up that says, please be kind to our staff. They showed up today. And early learning professionals and school aid professionals, we've always been showing up. And so I want to encourage everyone to say thank you and show appreciation, just a simple thank you to every single teacher, caregiver. If it's a family member that is caring for your children, maybe it's an aunt or a neighbor, say thank you. Just that appreciation and that acknowledgement will go a long ways, because they showed up and they've been showing up every day.
And it's a lot of these are kind of feel like some simple solutions, and like that positive piece that, you talked about, Adrian, touched on my love of advocacy. I do know that DCYF is, I don't want to get too excited, but use the phrase listening, that there are some of these solutions that we know we've all been talking about being in the field. One of them being how many kids are showing up and getting paid based on enrollment or based on attendance. I know during the pandemic that changed, where it was the amount of students that were enrolled in your program, you could count on that subsidy payment. That was sustainable for people to count on. Something we're trying to advocate for now and work with DCUF is keeping that. Those solutions exist. As long as we keep raising voices, it sounds like maybe there's a chance to listen. Because this really is what hopefully, I know you mentioned, Mike, that I was hoping that this would be a chance to blow up what was already wrong, as it be the straw that broke the camel's back. We've almost gotten there. I don't want it to break, but bringing the spotlight and continuing to talk about it and making people realize that there are actually active, tangible solutions that would make a huge difference in someone's ability to plan, knowing that what they're going to get paid every month. I mean, that's a very basic expectation that for someone to have and want in their life.
I just want to point out that in Washington State, we actually have some amazing advocates and champions for children, like Patty Murray and like Claire Wilson. Part of the problem is it's getting things financed. Everyone will say, I love children, I love families, that's so important. Getting it to the committee that actually will pay for it and getting it passed there is where it gets stuck year after year after year.
Well, and then sustaining that funding as well, because 2 years later, new budget comes out and there's a new group of legislators in office because, so-and-so left or they were, challenged and voted out. And, they have different priorities and different agendas and different stakeholders that they're trying to please. And it comes down to who has the most friends in high places and what they want. And there's just too much influence in our government that does not take into account the needs and thinking about all of the different resources that became available because of this pandemic and the different ways that financial supports were suddenly available. And now they are saying, well, they're over. I got a notice that my student loans are going to have to start being paid again next month. And yet we are in a huge inflation crisis. And it's the COVID delay of life and progression in a lot of ways, it opened our eyes to the financial strain people were already under and how those supports really were lifesavers. And now they are all going away. And we're seeing, the housing crisis becoming more of a concern. We're seeing this inflation taking over. Wages are not matching inflation even close. And, there's just so much that's piling on and making it really challenging for folks to feel like they can get ahead. And I think that that's where some of that additional strain in the workforce with childcare is coming from, because people are looking for better paying jobs and better ways to support their home and family.
I think that kind of brings us towards the end of today. You got any final thoughts? Anyone enjoying something fun in the sun today? How are we going to self-care after this episode?
I'm going to take off my shoes and put my feet in the grass.
Later today, I am going to have another conversation with my tomato plants and tell them, see, life does get better sometimes. Enjoy it while it lasts.
I'm just going to remember to stay hydrated.
We here at the Rainy Day Recess podcast hope you have enjoyed, been inspired by, and learned from our content today. Please submit any questions you'd like us to discuss on air to ccpodcast@childcare.org. If you'd like any more information on what you've heard today, please reach out to us directly or contact your coach.